All right, this is going to be a really tough video. For all of those who don't know me, my name is Elise and I'm Another Truth here on YouTube. I welcome you and I welcome back my ongoing subscribers. I do appreciate the time that you have taken to listen to what I have to say. This is the video I'd rather not make. I know you hear that in a lot of videos, but I must. This will center around child exploitation, not in dangerous specifics, but there are some data points you need to hear, and how children with disabilities are generally and grossly underserved across the world, and they are among the most vulnerable people, if not the most vulnerable people, on the face of the planet. I had the unfortunate opportunity to receive some bad news that Foodie Beauty has exploited this child once again, put her in a public post to try to pass off as if she's getting this vaunted education that she raised over $1,000 for, at least for starting fees, new clothes, things like that. And from what I understand, from what in my own research that I've talked about, most likely it was from a humanitarian organization that provides that um, through funds that are raised through NGOs, local organizations, but it's mainly for informal education and some enrichment, but it's not what Foodie Beauty had offered to the public. What Foodie Beauty raised in her fundraiser was nothing but funds to support herself, none of which went on this child, I am convinced. Without the proper receipts to know what was spent and where, there is no confirmation at all that she has spent anything on this child other than getting some amount of services possibly already available to the child. And Salah didn't pay for anything either because he's another useless sack of shit, liar, and exploiter of this child. And the fact that Foodie Beauty went on and on about talking about how much she cares about this child. She was going to work hard for this child. She was going to send private DMs with this child's pictures, God knows what, because she is the exploiter of children. She should never be around kids whatsoever. She is a danger to them. She will harm them, and any type of relationship she has with them is transactional as much as she can grift and make money from it. So I do notice that there are people who are talking about this and the child exploitation part very considerably. They're doing it honestly. Others are paying more attention to Foodie Beauty's gluttony and stuff. I don't give a shit what Foodie Beauty does on her channel with her audience, as long as she's just doing that with herself and she's not bringing in vulnerable people, especially people with disabilities who are financially vulnerable or anything like that. This woman is a predator. Now, mind you, I'm just here giving you my perspectives, opinions, and understanding of what's going on. What I express throughout this video is my opinion. I will be bringing facts to more or less tell you where children with disabilities are in the world. Now, there's a reason why people don't talk often enough about children with disabilities. One, because they want to stay away from that topic to protect their money source. Number two, they don't see them as children deserving of equitable help and services or anything like that. Number three, they think, oh, well, the parents will just take care of them. The parents are strapped for cash. They're tired. They're constantly fighting the schools to even get an IEP, which is an individual education program, right? We have systems in the United States that's already breaking down the idea of IDEA. Um, an IDEA stands to protect children with disabilities, um, in the sense that children can have access um, to free education that is appropriate for them in the least restrictive environment possible. Okay, that is changing because what's going to happen, let's say, for the Medicaid cuts in the United States, that is going to impact the schools, especially children with low income and especially with children with disabilities who rely on it to get physical therapy, to get emotional therapy, to get mental health therapy, the things that helps them stay in school and stay connected to the community. Once that is taken away, those children are brought out of sight, which is intentional and purposeful. And yes, you can, you can give a little bit of grace to people who don't always talk about these points because they're sensitive points. They're not good political talking points. I've seen this time and time again. I'm so tired of it, but it is intentional. It's intentional to keep children with disabilities. The problems with public schools who don't supply the correct, the most proper part of school intact, and no one's talking about this level of detriment. I know because there are people in my own community who are facing it, and it's one of the most horrifying, disheartening things ever. And if you hear my cat go nuts, it's because he's in a playful mood. So I'd like to begin my rant with something that I had composed a few days ago. And I figure that I'm in the frame of mind to do it, but it might be upsetting to some of you. So please, use the best judgment, take care of yourselves, and also again understand everything is based on my opinions, perspectives, life experience, and understanding of what's going on. I am not an expert, and um, I do not have all of the answers. So, of course, many people are rightly calling Foodie Beauty a scammer. She is. She's a fucking thief. But far fewer are connecting the dots to the deeper exploitation of a disabled child and that so called fundraiser of hers with no verified receipts to prove where the money went. And as you can see, she exploited the child again. The child has no idea what's going on. It sets the child up to be connected with perverts on this platform. She knows damn well there are perverts on this platform. She being one of them doesn't care. It's the exploitation. Now, this is not just fraud. It's the exploitation of a profoundly vulnerable child, one whose reality is shaped by global inequities. So let's get into that. Now, I will bring some global perspectives as well as perspectives from the United States. This doesn't answer everything. Approximately 15% of the world's population has a disability, with up to 190 million people facing significant functional limitations as it is, with poor infrastructure, accessibility to safe surroundings, and access to physical spaces. Disabled individuals are more than twice as likely to be denied health care, nearly 3 times more likely to experience providers' inadequate skills, and 4 times more likely to be treated poorly compared to non disabled people. That also means that their rights tend to be violated at an alarming rate without these basics that they're entitled to supplied, and the right to participate in the community, which is called community engagement. Education gaps are stark, so we'll start with a couple of examples. In Bolivia, 98% of non disabled children attended school compared to under 40% of children with disabilities. Usually, this is based on inadequate infrastructure, cultural perspectives, poverty. Income plays a very big role in who gets what. And Foodie understood this, and she made that a point in raising that money for herself and not for this child. In Indonesia, over 80% of non-disabled children go to school, while fewer than 25% of disabled children do. And about 180 to 220 million young people worldwide live with disabilities. 80% in developing regions are lacking access to education, healthcare, and employment. Those numbers are much different in Syria, considerably lower. I've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about it again. Globally, the risk of sexual violence is 4.5 times greater for children with intellectual disabilities, with similar trends in the U.S., where adults with intellectual disabilities face sexual violence at 5 times the rate of non-disabled peers. So children face this threat. This is why I say they are the most vulnerable people on the planet, and especially in a war-torn place like Syria, with collapsed infrastructure and predators like Foodie Beauty coming in and exploiting children, which people have done in different developing and third world countries across the world, when Western men would go over and do what they do to vulnerable children and young women. What Foodie Beauty here, it's based on financial gain. I don't think there's anything else with that, but you never know. I keep that door open, because when there is lawlessness and there's nobody looking out for vulnerable people, nobody caring, nobody talking about it, nobody really thinking that they deserve equity, much less equality. You can't have equality without equity. This is the problem. So in the United States, up to 7.5 million students, about 15% of public school enrollment between the ages of 3 and 21, receive special education under IDEA. I had explained that before. 32% have specific learning disabilities, 19 have speech language impairments, 15% other health impairments like asthma, and 12 to 13% with neurodivergence such as autism, and mental health. And mental health can be exacerbated by not having the attention, not having the health care, not having the emotional support to get through it. People with disabilities are much less likely to complete high school education. In 2023, just 13% of those with disabilities hold a 4-year college degree, compared to 23% of non-disabled individuals. So that means that people are not reaching their goals, and that starts within the services. How are they getting services to be able to stay in school? Who's paying for the education? Who's paying for the extra support? When I was in school 3 years ago to finish my degree, if I did not have the therapeutic support and the ADA support and the emotional support I had in school, I probably would not have finished. And I did it successfully based on that. So I know it can work. I know it can work if people expended the budget to do it, but they fucking don't. Legal protections are under threat. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act in the United States, which safeguards access to education, employment, and public services for 70 million Americans with disabilities, is facing attacks that could roll back decades of rights. It's already starting. They want to erase people with disabilities, neurodivergence. They want to erase children with disabilities because they see them as a sponge on the healthcare system, the school system. That's why these people, no, they get up on their fucking podiums and they say, oh, we care. This is what we're doing. And I'm saying this in general. They don't. They don't. What they say has no value. It's performative. Performative action happens all the time. There's never any extra consideration, provisions, and the true equitable support of children with disabilities in school, especially if they're low income. And with the Medicaid cuts, it's going to make it worse. And I don't see a lot of people jumping up and down about it either. It's so fucking frustrating. So, it puts people in a situation of hopelessness. The stress alone means that they cannot concentrate or function. The parents don't get the support that they need because they either feel like they don't deserve it or they're being classed based on their income status, their race, single parenthood, you name it. People are still blaming children for their parents' struggles, and parents should not have to struggle to ensure their child with special needs and disabilities get equitable, solid education, and not these poo-poo classes that do nothing to enrich a child to help them develop in the way that they need to individually. I am so beyond angry about this. It's disgusting. And this shit happens in the United States of America. Here's a kicker: violence rates are alarmingly higher. Disabled teenagers 12 through 15 experience violence at 144 per 1,000 compared to 38% or so per 1,000 for their non-disabled peers, a nearly fourfold increase. Now, mind you, poverty, race, immigration status makes people targets as well, even if they're non-disabled, and people do become disabled from those. The anxiety is incredible, and people start avoiding schools, getting health appointments, going out and get nutritional access because they are under threat of being scooped up by masked armed thugs who aren't even police officers, don't even have proper warrants in doing that. And yes, I said it. I don't give a fuck what you think. Can you imagine what that's like for a child? It's not funny. It's not funny. And don't blame the parents. It's not funny to do that to a child. Okay, I already mentioned about legal protections. All right, so legal protections are under threat. Um, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which safeguards access to education, employment, and public services for 70 million Americans with disabilities, is facing attacks that could roll back. I mentioned that already. I mentioned the violence rates, the educational rates, and now Medicaid cuts jeopardize billions in school-based services, speech therapy, counseling, and more, threatening students already at risk. I've gone into that. Now, in Syria, in conflict-ravaged Syria, children with disabilities are disproportionately excluded and endangered. Verified data shows around 28% of Syrians have a disability. 28% of Syrians have a disability, nearly double the global average due to war-inflicted injuries, insufficient care, broken infrastructure, and broken hearts and traumatized minds. Yes, this is what this fat foodie is doing. Okay? And, and I'm referring to her gluttony and selfishness, not necessarily to her body shape. But she goes in there, absorbs resources, compromises the safety of others, doesn't care. She's doing exactly what others have done to the most vulnerable people on the planet. Just by her presence alone. She's not affiliated with any NGO or charity of a legitimate status or anything like that. She is in there to cause harm, to disrupt. Now, over 1.5 million people now live with war-related disabilities. Over 360 children alone were injured in 2017, adding to this staggering toll. The destruction of educational and medical facilities has severely limited access to fitting services, special schooling, and assistive devices. So when Foodie Beauty talks about like this seemingly advanced system, okay, that's not based on reality. It just doesn't fucking exist in Syria anymore. She is reading out of a playbook of World Vision. Informal educational programs offered by NGOs frequently shut down due to funding shortages, and it's going to happen, especially the austerity of the United States shift around global participation. Families report severe mental health impacts for their children when these supports disappear. It's just a matter of time. And you have this idiotic, stupid asshole that raised so much money that could have made a considerable difference in the security, safety, educational possibilities, which I do not even know if they exist in Syria. She used it buying blooming um, onions, okay, the worst looking sandwiches, stuff in her fucking face, and air conditioning in Qatar without considering what this little girl might have needed. Maybe she wants an air conditioner. Maybe she wants a blooming onion or a refreshing drink, cold drink with ice, or a sandwich, a nice new fresh pair of clothing, being able to wash hands, being able to paint, to create, to have a story read to her. This asshole did nothing of a sort to help this child. Shutting down a scam is easier than confronting systemic ableism, but justice means more. Naming the exploitation, not just the deception, demanding accountability from Foodie Beauty, insisting on inclusion, visibility, and rights for every child regardless of ability. Silence erases these, speaking out restores it. And I do kind of want to go back to the Medicaid issue because it's such a big problem. Um, it's an exponential problem. So, Medicaid cuts can have a huge ripple effect on the educational path of children, especially those with disabilities, because Medicaid doesn't just pay for hospital visits or prescriptions, it also funds a lot of school based services that are essential for learning and development. Here's how that impact plays out. Listen carefully. Direct loss of school based supports. Medicaid helps pay for speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing services, counseling, and mental health supports inside schools. Now, I'm just referring to the United States. This should be across the board. If these services are cut or reduced, kids may miss out on crucial interventions, especially during early development when delays can be reversed or minimized with the right help. When I say reversed or minimized, to be worked on. One of my children had early intervention. It wasn't because of an intellectual issue. It had a lot to do with with a physical disability that they had at birth because of a birth injury, because of lousy fucking care I got, okay, for the first pregnancy. So my child had to go through nearly a year of therapy to be able to reach their physical milestones. But the problem with that is it affects other types of engagement. It affects learning things. It affects relating to things. Although um, those were intact, but not having these services at all can impact everything else about a child in the long run. I was fortunate enough to be able to have that. My child is working wonderfully, is successful, and is fine, but That's what early intervention can do, plus some. Without therapies and accommodations, students with disabilities may struggle to keep pace with peers academically, more or less what I stated earlier. Skills like communication, social interaction, and motor coordination may not develop as they should, which can impact literacy, math skills, and overall school readiness, but also to take part in any other school based function like going on trips, going on excursions. Partaking in school activities, learning, and so on. This causes increased absences. Medicaid covers certain medical equipment and supports like wheelchairs, breathing treatment, seizure management that allows students to attend school safety. So can you imagine a child in a war-torn country that doesn't have access to even basic medical services to help with their needs so that they can participate? Foodie never paid for any specialized medical services for this child, if any were available, and nor did Foodie ever consider that, the child's security and the child's academic and social well-being. She did nothing to contribute to that. She took that money and used it to feed her fat fucking face, okay? Tell every one of us that we were garbage for speaking out against her, and even threatened to adopt the child. So would be some impositions on special education budgets where the medical stuff isn't being paid for. So by law, ideas, schools must provide services to students with disabilities. Schools still have to meet these obligations, but the money will have to come from already stretched special education budgets, meaning fewer resources for all students. The long-term consequences are devastating. Reduced early intervention and ongoing supports can lead to lower academic achievement, decreased graduation rates, decreased morale, opportunities, limited post-secondary opportunities, and not only that, the ability to understand one's right to be able to partake in communication, education, and feeling like they're a part of the community when they in fact are. This can also have lifetime effects, slower employment, reduced independence, and independence is critical for a person with disabilities. Being able to do things on people's own, that means taking away education, special accommodations, all of these things, and higher reliance on public assistance later in life, which can mean that not everybody will have the support that they need to fill out convoluted uh, applications for services, which means they would be readily kicked off for that purpose. So in short, Medicaid cuts don't just hurt healthcare, they cut into the very foundation of a child's education, especially for those with disabilities. It's a quiet but powerful driver of inequality, because when a child loses access to these therapies, assistive technology, or in-school nursing, their chances of succeeding in school and beyond shrink dramatically. And think about the morale. Who's going to be there for them? So who's there for this little girl that um, Chantel is exploiting, Foodie Beauty's exploiting? She's not in the United States. She doesn't even have the opportunity to have her rights upheld. She is trapped by a war-torn system with decisions made by men. And here she is, stuck with this predator and her predator husband, financial predators, who will continue to raise money through her desperation. Foodie Beauty has no respect for education, quality of life, rights, nothing. Whatever Foodie touches becomes destroyed. This woman is awful. I've reported the posts as child abuse. I wish I could explain why, but this woman is horrible. She is disgusting. And with all of these facts out there, stop donating to her.